Hello there and welcome. It's the Jordan Rich Show here on WBZ, and it's great to be with you on this very nice Saturday morning. Our first guest is a return guest, Heidi Siefkas. She is with a new book called With New Eyes, The Power of Perspective, and somewhere in a land of magic and mystery, I think it's called Hawaii, is where Heidi makes her home these days. Hi, Heidi.
Hi, sending you an aloha, as we say here. It's Aloha Friday, which is TGIF in Hawaiian.
Well, Heidi, congratulations. This is book number 2. And by way of introduction, we should say that you wrote a book a while back, and you were here in studio. It was called When All Balls Drop, and it really was about overcoming setbacks. Why don't you review where you were back then when you wrote that one?
It's a true story of post-traumatic growth, and a lot of people are familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder, but maybe not so familiar with the upside of trauma or loss. And I, in fact, didn't even know that this term existed. I just called it Heidi 2.0. What happened after I took out the trash 6 years ago, and it changed my life. On a normal fall day in upstate New York, a 1,000-pound tree limb broke my neck, and it left me unconscious for days.
Yeah, that'll definitely change your life. No question about that. I mean, how
often?
Yeah.
How could anyone think that was a good thing? That's something that post-traumatic growth does. It gave me time to reflect, and it was a ripple effect of change that sparked a newer, happier, truer version of who I am now.
Because that one moment when this horrible thing happened to you, this accident, this freak accident, which you have to say is so rare and unusual, not just your health changed, but your whole life as it was being led. Talk a little bit about your personal life, your relationships and how that was affected.
Well, it was the moment that all of my balls dropped. All of the pillars in my life, my health, marriage, and career just seemed to fall. And while I was recovering from this traumatic accident, my health was in peril, and it was going to be a long recovery if full recovery was even possible. I found out that my husband had been living a double life. So the person that I needed to rely upon during my recovery was not necessarily the most truthful, but I had to prioritize and say, okay, I'm going to deal with my health first. Once I get that under control, I will deal with the marriage. Yeah. And quite honestly, at that point in time, my professional identity was also very important to me. I think all of us can relate to classifying ourselves by something that we do. And I was a high-power executive in the travel industry, traveling from Berlin to L.A. to Florida. And that career also vanished before my eyes because of the lengthy recovery.
Heidi Siefkas is here, and she was here a while back when her first book came out, When All Balls Drop. Her latest is called With New Eyes. So you really have taken on this role of adventurer, and some of the adventures are, well, typical adventures, going to all kinds of places around the world, but also your adventures in sort of starting a new life as a single person. You talk a lot about dating these days.
Oh, in With New Eyes, I took many adventures, whether they're trying new sports, skydiving, traveling, but also jumping into the dating scene, wherever that may be, is also an adventure. And I think that many of the listeners can relate to dating hiccups. And during that new phase in my life, I dated, I would say, some Mr. Wrongs.
How have you done since the book came out? Are you still in that process or what?
Well, actually, through dating these maybe not perfect matches, I learned how to better put together my checklist of what I wanted and, of course, what I didn't want. And I decided against, I guess, most people that are currently looking now, which they implement both in-person and online searches. I said, you know what? I'm just not going to concentrate about dating anymore, and I'm just going to follow whatever I'm curious about. And I ended up adventuring, and I took a flight lesson. And lo and behold, I met Mr. Right after dating many Mr. Wrongs while I was taking a flight lesson in South Florida in my first ever helicopter flight.
See, your heart soared. That's the way it works sometimes. You never know. And that's the thing about life, as you say, life 2.0. You never really know, but you kind of have an inkling that things are going in the right direction. And we're talking with Heidi Siefkas, spelled Siefkas. She was here a while back. Terrific gal, very exciting to take your life back after being really severely injured in a freak accident and to sort of live a brand new life. And the new one is called With New Eyes, The Power of Perspective. So perspective is everything, isn't it? If you wake up in the middle of the night with fear and trepidation and anger, that's one way to wake up. If you wake up with a sense of hope and gratitude, that's a whole different way to wake up. So you've been waking up now in a whole new life since the accident, haven't you?
Absolutely. And what I found out through my process is that it's really the only control that we do have is over our mind and the way that we perceive our situation. And that was the gift of having that tree strike me, put a forced pause on my life, and then have other things, the marriage and career, all go on a stall, that I had the opportunity to really think and reflect on the situation I was in. I found that I could look at it as the bottom of the barrel, but I decided to spin it and that there was an upside to losing everything.
In a crazy world where anything can happen, sometimes things happen to us that are totally out of our control. It happened to Heidi Siefkas, my guest, who is from this area originally, now living in Hawaii at the moment. And Heidi has written a couple of books about her experience. She was hit by a tree in a freak accident, a tree limb that really set her back physically, but gave her a chance to bounce back emotionally and physically and spiritually. Her latest book called With New Eyes, and Heidi Siefkas' website is her name, Heidi, Heidi, Siefkas, Siefkas.com. She speaks to groups, I'm sure, all over the world and is doing great work. So we were talking a little bit about changing perspective. One does not need to travel to New Zealand or Hawaii or the Antarctic necessarily to get that new perspective. But what do you think about just changing the environment you're living in?
I wrote With New Eyes because the people around me, whether I was speaking to groups or getting feedback from readers of my first book, When All Balls Drop, that not everyone, or very few people, in fact, will have the opportunity or the circumstance to be put in a traumatic situation as I was. A 1,000-pound tree limb breaking your neck by taking out the trash. There are very few people that will go through that situation, and there are opportunities for life change or changing perspective everywhere. I typically use adventure as a way to shift perspective. And with that said, I define that as something that's challenging, it's new, perhaps even frightening. But that can be different for each and every person. And like you said, changing your environment is key. Doing something that gets you out of that perpetual to-do list that we all have, and having a one-track focus, whether that is trying a new sport, learning a new language, or perhaps even renting a car in an unfamiliar city.
There's a chapter called Captain's Advice, Pick Your Battles. And I think that's an important lesson here, too. You have an opportunity to fight back, as you did, getting your health back in shape and realizing that the man in your life wasn't as reliable and all that kind of stuff. But if you just go after everything at once and you're handling battles on all fronts, man, you're going to wear yourself out even faster. So let's conclude with that because of time here. What about picking one's battles, the battles you picked, first of all?
I had a full-blown life catastrophe. I had to deal with my health in peril, a disintegrated marriage with betrayal, and no career. I had to pick my life back up and create it anew. I knew that my priorities were to get my health squared away, and then I would deal with everything afterwards. I happened to choose marriage as the second thing to conquer and make decisions whether to stay or to go, and then the third as my career. And the captain that I did seek advice from was my doctor who, to this day, I remain in contact with Dr. R, and he was very wise that he said that my life change wasn't necessarily the accident. It wasn't the tree that hit me, and that day it would be the perspective that I gained and the life path that I choose to go forward with. Now, looking at my world and the situation with new eyes.
Right. And that's the title of the book, With New Eyes, The Power of Perspective. And as you go forth and write these books and speak to groups all over the world, must give you a pretty good feeling to know that not only have you learned a lesson, and many, but you're able to sort of bring these lessons to others as a gift.
It's tremendous. I wrote both books in journal entries throughout my process as a way to be therapeutic to my own path. But I quickly learned by sharing my story with others just in passing that it was inspirational, that if you can overcome this 1-2 sucker punch that you were served, I can also overcome mine. And you not only triumphed, but you're now thriving. And so that was the I guess wisdom that I wanted to pass on to the readers as well as audiences that I speak to in When All Balls Drop. The second book, it basically says that you don't necessarily need to have a hardship or a trauma. You can create that next version yourself. And the way that you can do it is by injecting some of this perspective, changing your situation frequently, taking an adventure, taking some risks.
Absolutely. It's a great message. You're such a breath of fresh air and a bright light here. It's great to welcome you back during the holiday season, Heidi. I know that a lot of your friends and family and colleagues and so forth in the New England area and the Boston area certainly are hearing you tonight and wishing you just continued great success and good health. And very quickly, 30 seconds, where do your travels take you next? I know you're working on a book about Cuba and other things. Seriously, what's in the docket, say, for the next month? Anywhere?
I have just landed of 2 months of perpetual travel from Greece, Turkey, Italy, Florida, Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia. So I'm actually staying put in Hawaii until the turn of the new year. And I will be heading back to Cuba, one of my favorite places on the planet, as well as Spain, which is a place that is near and dear to my heart as I lived there for 2 years in my college years.
I love this woman. She's laying low and just kind of hanging out in Hawaii. Gee whiz. Yeah, but I'm very happy to hear from you. Really am. And thanks for joining us again. And congratulations on book 2 and many more great projects to come. You're really inspiring and a lot of fun to have on the air. Thank you so much, Heidi.